Good afternoon, all of you. Thank you for pronouncing cocktail and session in the same sentence. That's really not helpful, so we'll try to keep you as much awake as possible. This session is about the next generation of sandboxes. What I want to say to introduce it is that until 3 years ago, the regulator was the big absent in most of the FinTech discussion. And right now, I have the honor to introduce the Governor of the Central Bank of Bahrain, sharing an introductory thoughts about sandboxes and how regulation is impacting FinTech. Join me with a big round of applause to welcome Rasheed Maraj, the Governor of the Central Bank of Bahrain, on stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Matteo, for giving me this opportunity to speak in this session. At the Central Bank of Bahrain, we believe that a practical approach to FinTech is the ideal way to move forward, away from the extreme of total rejection or total acceptance of FinTech. Accordingly, when we decide to encourage a FinTech solution, we try to fit it in one of three categories. The first category is when the existing product or services is inefficient, and FinTech offers a better solution without increasing the overall risk of the system. For instance, electronic KYC, cloud computing are good examples of this category. Here, the CBB's approach is to wholeheartedly adopt the FinTech solution without delay. We are working on establishing a nationwide KYC utility, eKYC utility, which is an enormous project with the long-term benefits not only for the financial sector, but for other economic sector as well. The second category is when the FinTech solution is better than the existing product or services, but also increase the overall risk of the financial system. However, these added risks can be mitigated through tools and techniques that already exist or can be easily developed. For instance, remittances services using digital platform is a good example of this aspect. The third category is when the FinTech solution is suboptimal or not better than the existing products or services, or increase the overall risk the financial system has to face without adequate tools and technique to mitigate those risks. When presented with such option, the CBB either choose to reject the FinTech solution or accept it with limitation, constraints, and conditions. Our recently released crowdfunding directives reflect this approach, where unbridled peer-to-peer lending at retail level at this stage has not been allowed. Ladies and gentlemen, Bahrain has had a long history of proactive adoption of new technology. In the past few years, the CBB, the Central Bank of Bahrain, took a number of important steps in this regard, which include introduction of a new license of payment services and allowing payment services provider to issue prepaid cards to allow the unbankable segments access to affordable payment services, including remittances. We have also introduced card processing license to encourage innovation and use of advanced technologies by third-party processors and back-office operation. Accordingly, we have a total of 16 payment services and card processing companies operating today. Introduction of detailed rules and outsourcing of financial services to facilitate more innovation. allowing banks to use cloud computing, issuance of regulatory sandbox framework. We have so far approved 5 companies out of 19 applications received for the regulatory sandbox in the last 6 months since it was started, and they are in the various stages of setting up. We have issued also the crowdfunding rules, both equity and debt-based, and for conventional and as well as Sharia compliance segments. We have approved 1 company to offer such service in Bahrain recently. The overall ecosystem of FinTech is developing nicely in Bahrain. Recent launch by the Economic Development Board of Bahrain, FinTech Bay, a physical space to house innovative companies, is a great stride forward. We appreciate these initiatives and fully support it. Other initiatives include the establishment of industry accelerators, business plan competition, financial support platforms, and other measures to encourage entrepreneurship. In our interaction with the banking industry, we emphasize the need to invest more in FinTech. It is heartening to see that banks, boards, and senior managements realize the importance of FinTech. A combination of rising customer demands and improved supply of FinTech solutions suggests that the future will be very different from the past, and it will arrive sooner than we expect. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me this opportunity, and we start our panel session. Thank you.
I've been told you have to sit here.
Good.
And it's not anymore Mr. Govenor, it's Rasheed. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
So, Val, Jorge, and Charles, you know, big applause, guys. Come on, the panelists are coming on stage. You guys are supposed to know where to sit because.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, Jorge, Val. Okay, so we got exactly 25 minutes for 32 questions that I have to ask them and the Q&A, right? So we're going to make it as snappy as possible. 1 minute each, beside Rasheed, of course, because you introduced yourself already. Who you are, what you do. Charles.
My name is Charles Ziosi. I work for the Hong Kong government. I'm the head of FinTech. My team is distributed between Hong Kong, London, and San Francisco. And we are basically working with the top technology player and top FinTech companies to make the best use of Hong Kong as their FinTech hub for the north of Asia market.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Jorge Ruiz. I'm the founder and CEO for Above and Beyond. We are the only marketplace for fintechs and banks that they connect, not just a sandbox, but also a production site that we're going to talk a little bit more about. So that was 15 seconds.
Amazing. Val.
Hi, everyone. My name is Val, CEO and founder of PolicyPal. So PolicyPal is the first startup that graduated out of Singapore regulatory MAS FinTech Sandbox. We started 2 years ago as a policy management platform. Over time, we went through the Sandbox, gotten our insurance broker license. 2 weeks ago, we just raised an ICO round of $20 million to expand into distribution and also generation of insurance products through a peer-to-peer mutual aid platform. So very happy to be here. Just took a red-eye flight over from Singapore last night, so I arrived this morning. Pardon me if I'm a little bit slow in my response.
That's okay, because actually you're getting the first question, so I'll make sure that you don't fall just yet. So tell us a little bit, how was your experience in the Singapore Sandbox? What are the biggest challenges? Because then the other guys are going to kind of challenge you on the challenges that you described. Go ahead.
Okay. So we started in 2016 as a policy management platform because I started a company based on my own personal experience dealing with insurance policy. It was quite a nightmare for my family. Actually, a bit of a story is that I actually study and work in London, so coming back here is almost my second home. And I moved back to Singapore in 2013 because my mom was there diagnosed with cancer. Thankfully, she recovered. I helped her to submit for insurance claims payout. Then I realized realized the nightmare of not managing insurance policy properly because the insurance company rejected the claim. Back and forth communication, they only returned us the insurance premium instead of the sum assured. A few months down the road in December the same year, unfortunately, my dad passed away due to heart attack. Then again, we have to deal with insurance documents. So within a short period of time, back and forth communication with the insurance company didn't get to sort out our claims properly. So I started PolicyPal just to help people manage insurance policies on a digital mobile app platform. So people snap a photo of their insurance document using optical character recognition. We scan and map the insurance jargons, help them understand, manage it over there. So we were 2.5 months old, and then I was door knocking on insurance companies, brokers based in Singapore, but most of them rejected us because we were not mature enough, we didn't have any license. So Singapore regulator MAS announced that they are going to launch the MAS FinTech Sandbox. So I started engaging them, asking them when they're launching, what are the parameters, what are the things that we need to look into. So thereafter, we wrote into them, even before the whole white paper was out. We suggested what we wanted to do. One of the challenges was because we were the first company, and back then the white paper wasn't out yet. We're not too sure what the regulators were looking out for. So I took a lot of reference from FCA. So FCA application, what they're looking out for, what the potential risks that a startup will face when they enter the sandbox. So those were the challenges because you don't have anyone to learn from. You have to learn from another country. But I think that learning from another country and try to localize it in Singapore helped us a lot. On top of that, when we entered the sandbox, the challenge was that both managing on the regulation side and also the business side, and also fundraising, because as a startup, you're constantly trying to survive, swimming for the next breath to take, right? So you have to make sure that you continue your business, you have your customer. At the same time, you're within the whole restriction that is set on you. But what I learned is that always work closely with the regulators, keep them posted on what are the potential like features that you're rolling out, hear from them, their feedback before you actually start working on it. That will save you a lot of time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Val. So now a question for you guys. So you just heard how a startup felt about being in a relationship with the regulator. When we started prepping this panel, my first sentence was, sometimes regulators don't know much about sandboxes in general. Why? Because culturally speaking, if a bank is miles away from a startup, regulators usually are 3 galaxies away from startups. So there is a culture thing. And there is also, how do you guys, regulators and fintech infrastructures, get equipped to even talk with them? So maybe let's give 2 minutes to the Govenor to.
All right, let me put you on the mind of regulators. The memory of the financial crisis is still fresh. So people are worried whether we have another blow up in the financial system. So the big challenge for us is how to overcome this fear. We regulators, we would like to quantify the risks and put mitigators to ensure that the system works. So when the fintech issues came to us, it was a mental hurdle that we have to pass and to take this risk into consideration, how much this could put pressure on the existing systems. I happen to give or characterize the fintech compared to the conventional banking. Conventional banking lies, for a regulator, lies going into a conventional warfare. Your tanks and artillery and all that stuff. But fintech is like a guerrilla warfare. You don't know how to deal with it.
There are some nice tweets here, huh?
as a conventional army with command and control and all that checks and balances. So for me, the biggest hurdle was, and for my colleagues at the bank, was in how to make this mindset shift, to understand and know this one is the future. And we have to prepare ourselves and to prepare our staff and the regulations in order to accommodate them. And if there is any risk, it's on us to work around solutions, to put in place so that we get this on board and energize the whole community, the financial community, to buy this.
Totally. Charles and Jorge, please react to that.
I think it's a learning process for both the startups and also for the regulators. And it's a whole story now. Some countries have been starting many years ago, like in the UK. In Hong Kong, we started our first sandbox in 2016, and the HKMA just released very officially sandbox number 2. So I think it's just a statement that they've been learning from the first version, and they are launching a second version. So it's a process where startups get to learn and regulators get to learn. I totally agree. And the way we communicate, I'm just jumping on PolicyPal experience with being the first sandbox candidate in Singapore. I guess in Hong Kong we went through the same process and probably some friction as well, and we launched with the second version of the sandbox a new chatting system and a new kind of protocol for startups in Hong Kong to speak with the regulators, because we found that it was not exactly aligned with the demand from the market, and there was too much either frustrations or the channels were not open the right way. So the second version of the sandbox is also basically rolling down new ways to communicate for startups with the regulators, either from Hong Kong or remotely, so you can get a video conference with the regulators, you can chat live with them, asking some first questions, and just get a better user experience. Like a startup will design a user experience for customers, I guess regulators also are trying to engage in the right way the technologies to make sure their ecosystem remains lively.
We will talk about the next generation of sandboxes just in a little while. Jorge.
Yeah, well, I'm not a regulator. I'm a private sector, and what we did is not that many countries have a sandbox. So what we did is build a platform that would allow banks and fintechs to test their solutions, but not just test, because after that you test and after the regulator says, okay, you can do business, then you have to integrate to a bank, and then you have to create a business model, and then you have to go live. So our thought when we created the company was to build something that goes on all those different stages of a product life. So now what we do is we test with the bank, we go live, and then we start making business for everybody. So ours is more like a global sandbox that does testing and production. So I think that's something that maybe it's the topic that you're saying, which is what's the next level or the next generation of sandbox that possibly will be not just testing, but also why don't we accelerate the process of making business and potentially integrate banks with fintechs?
Actually, this is a good transition that was totally unplanned to a question that you don't know I'm about to ask.
Cool.
About sandboxes interoperability. Okay, so take Europe, for example, right? You know, Luxembourg has one, you know, Italy is about to build one. Yes, it's true, Italy is about to build a sandbox too, okay? We know how to do stuff. So, but thing is, hey, you know, there is the license porting for banks in the EU, right? So does it actually make sense to have a different sandbox per country? Because if I see Europe as a continent, same thing, Bahrain for the UAE region, right? So how much the dialogue, actually the technical dialogue and interoperability between different sandboxes, okay, is important. And actually, and after, you know, Val, your view, if tomorrow you need to, you know, you want to expand to Europe, you know, how would you go for it? Would you like to have the same approach that you did in Singapore? So let's keep this for last, and let's talk about interoperability first. Whomever wants to give a chance.
Look, I think the regulatory bodies across the globe are rising to this challenge. And Basel Committee now on banking regulations have started to establish certain regulations which will make it internationally accepted standards. I think once we have this whole setup of regulations that is acceptable, like Basel III, that can be implemented globally, I don't see why we don't have this arrangements between different sandboxes. But till we get there, which is it's going to be a very slow process. As I said, reluctantly, regulators are trying to accommodate themselves to the new challenges. Once we get there, I think then we will have a better view on how we make this thing operate.
And maybe what we do is going to help, because from the private side, what we do is we test once, and that can be shown to every regulator around the world. So just to give you an example, we have this fintech from Bolivia, from Latin America, that we integrated that fintech in Honduras, Panama, now we're going to integrate it in Haiti, and we integrated them in Singapore as well. And that was done in less than 2 months. So the fact of us bringing from the private sector a sandbox that is a global sandbox and that's also a production capability will allow everyone, fintechs and banks, to operate much faster.
I think we have to be patient, at least in some part of the world. It's a new and learning process. Regulators are having a lot on their plate, a lot to digest. Technology is usually faster than every one of us. And everyone is doing step by step. In Hong Kong, between the version 1 and the version 2 of the sandbox, in Hong Kong we've got 3 independent regulators. 1 regulator for banks, for capital market and wealth, and 1 for insurance. So it makes it even more complex for us. And now there is a scheme basically in Hong Kong. If you enter one sandbox, let's say as a bank, for some banking activities, and you also want to deploy something in the sandbox for let's say insurance, there will be basically a communication process, and there will be just one front office for you to take care of. So it's a process where we have to be patient. There is also a lot at stake. We should not embrace technology for embracing technology. I think regulators are doing their job, but we have to be a bit patient through this process.
Val, are you planning to do like a sandbox jumping, from one country to another?
Yeah, I think many people ask us what are we going to do when we exit out of, or not exit, expand out of Singapore. Actually, 2 weeks ago, I was in Milan with sharing about our experience in the sandbox with the regulators, and then quite a few regulators got together, and then they were talking about setting a global sandbox. So potentially, example, country A, B, C collaborating together. So this startup just need to enter into this global sandbox to test out the model immediately, instead of going to all different countries one by one to apply for sandbox. But for PolicyPal, if we're continuing the same business model, most of the regulators I've spoken to have mentioned that we don't really need to go into the sandbox, because if they understand what we're doing and it has been tested before, and also if they have relationship with Singapore regulators, they understand how they actually do the assessment on our solution, we can go straight to get a license instead of going through the sandbox. Because many people think that going through the sandbox is like it's just because I want to get like graduation out of the sandbox. But the purpose of us entering sandbox was mainly because we're a really young company. We did not meet the full requirements set up by the regulator to get a full license. Therefore, we need to do a trial, and because the OCR technology was completely new, no one has tested it before in the public. Therefore, we had to go into the sandbox. But if we do roll out something that's different, such as a new type of insurance policy or etc., then potentially we have to go into the sandbox again, because it's something that is new, never tested before, and that fits the sandbox criteria. Yeah.
So. The next question would be, as a sandbox, what are the metrics? How do you define success? Is that like number of startups? Is that number of startups that goes live? Is that number of speakers going around the world presenting their solution? And also, technically speaking, how do you prepare? How do you, like regulators, sandbox, prepare the fintechs to go live afterwards? I mean, what happens? Out of there? How do you prepare them? What happens afterwards?
I think you have 2 KPI. One KPI, and I'm not a regulator myself, I just want to make a disclosure, but I work obviously with many people from the ecosystem of Hong Kong. How many companies are you able to advise and guide for not going to the sandbox, but directly to business?
Which is a plus, right?
Which is exactly what we should be doing. Many people are excited to go in the sandbox, but should they be excited about going for real business and validating their business and grow their business? So maybe this can be one way. We're not doing it, I don't think we are, but one way to say, okay, how many people will actually redirect in the right directions rather than making them applying for something they don't really need. And the second KPI, I guess, is a very simple KPI. It's the same KPI you would have in a startup. You get some companies in a sandbox program. How many new products are released to the market after the sandbox program? This is one KPI which has been published by the HKMA. I'm obviously talking my book here, but in 2017 in Hong Kong, we got 28 companies experimenting in the HKMA sandbox in Hong Kong. After this experimentation of 28 companies, 19 products were released in productions to the Hong Kong market. This is a great KPI. It really shows some progress. So the projects were about biometrics, identifications, about remote onboarding for customers across the border, many different very classical topics. But I think pushing and I would say sharing this information with everyone is helping the whole ecosystem of regulators and FinTech to say, okay, we have to show some progress. We are experimenting, but going through this learning stage and learning process, trying to measure our progress, and this is a great way. How many people you guide and how much result, how do you really support the companies through the sandbox process?
A quick reaction, Rasheed. Would you agree with these metrics?
Well, look, I think in each country will have to have their own sets of criteria. For instance, in our country where we have a large expatriates community, any solution that will facilitate remittances, for instance, at fast, cheap, and convenient will be very much welcome. These kind of activities, for us, this is the way we value and assess anyone who will graduate into the real world from the sandbox.
So almost like an impact perspective,
what
right?
kind of value they bring to the economy.
Yeah.
Are they going to solve a problem that we have, or they will address certain sector that is unbanked? This is one thing. I think I want to just regress a little bit about the progress of regulations and the reaction of the regulators. I think what confused the picture so far is the advancement of this cryptocurrencies interest and exchanges, because it created a confusion in many parts of the world. Some countries will allow it, some countries are not. And with the dramatic explosion of this interest and certain setbacks again, created some reservation on the part of the regulators to take any decisive decision on this. And I think this will remain with us till we demystify this phenomena, till the regulators will be able to make sure that the cryptocurrencies are well regulated, well controlled in such a way that it will satisfy all our requirements, from the anti-money laundering requirements, from the cyber security interests, from the confidentiality, and all that stuff. And until we reach that stage, I think the confusion will continue.
We feel your pain, Governor. We feel your pain. Jorge.
Well, I'm not a regulator again, so when we talk about Sandbox, it's not just about regulation. It's also about, can you test your product? Can you make sure that it works? Can you make sure that it will add value to the clients? Usually if you're partnering with a financial institution, if it's going to add value to the financial institution. So our Sandbox, it's not to comply with regulation, it's also to make sure that the business model works, that the technology works, and that you can expand and that you can scale your business. Because if you can scale your business, that means that the FinTech can grow. And if you're a financial institution and you can scale your business through FinTechs, that's what we want to test. So in our case, it's not just about regulation, it's about how can you grow your business with multiple FinTechs at one time, and also if you're a FinTech with multiple financial institutions at the time.
So since we still have 9 seconds, I would like to ask a question to all of you, which is, what is the role of the incumbents? So, specifically, banks in this relationship between regulators / sandboxes and startups, okay? From the startup point of view, in your case, the insurances, and from the other ecosystem for the classic financial institutions. Val, quickly, 30 seconds.
I think the role for the incumbents or the insurance companies mainly is to adopt our PolicyPal network blockchain.
No, I'm actually asking in Singapore, how did you interact, how the interaction, with the insurance companies helped you in your journey within the sandbox? That was my question.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the question is, how do we actually work together with the insurance companies during the sandbox period, right? So the whole journey, working with MAS, we have 2 stages of approval. The first stage of approval allow us to have this letter to work together with the insurance company and then convince them that come together and do the trial together during the sandbox period. So we managed to get 2 insurance companies to work together and get some of their products for us to distribute on the mobile app. Even back then, we are not fully licensed yet, so we're operating as within the sandbox as a digital broker. So that's very important, where insurance companies, incumbents must be open to try something different, because it was quite challenging to convince their legal and compliance team within the insurance company that this letter is actually from the regulators.
Totally. Charles, Hong Kong banks.
Hong Kong banks were the first, in the version 1 of the sandbox in Hong Kong, the banks, the startups actually has to enter the sandbox with the banks. The second version of the sandbox is now open to startups directly. So I think at the end, the banks are branding the trust, the power of their brand. We are in FinTech, in finance, and the technology is not enough to grow your business. You have this trust component of any business model. So I guess the banks have to keep refining their models. I have no answer for you here to make sure that they don't kill the potential of technology or startups, but try to share in some way. Maybe open banking is part of the answer share the trust the customers have in their brand.
Jorge.
Yeah, very quickly, we launched a platform 9 months ago. Since then, we operate with 24 banks in 50 countries around the world and with 800 fintechs. So the speed by which the global financial ecosystem has responded to a platform like ours has been amazing. And all of those are banks that they want to accelerate their digitization through fintech. So it's been very, very positive.
How banks in Bahrain interacting with us?
Let me tell you what I told the banks. I told the banks, whatever works outside Bahrain, I want it to work in Bahrain. And if you are not going to provide it, I'll bring somebody else to do it for us.
With that, final words from the governor. Thank you very much, guys. Our time is over.